Thanks everyone. So I'd like to talk mainly about yield mapping in carrots and the experience that we're having at Harvest Moon, having just sort of started the project when we purchased a new harvester in December. So touch on a lot of the topics that Tim's covered there. So just quickly go over our goals. So we've got a lot of this technology obviously available to us to use on farm, but I guess my role is how to apply that commercially. So our goals with our installing our yield monitor were to measure yield in tonnes per hectare. Also, it's got other benefits, the software we're using to track the equipment. Also integrate other technology such as satellite imagery with the yield maps that we generate from the yield monitor. It's also important for us in fresh market vegetables to be able to accurately stock take what volumes we've got in the field. So there's hopefully capability using this technology to do that and use that in conjunction like with yield prediction as well, so we know what volumes of product come to us, and obviously allow better decision making around scheduling of harvest, and there'd be other ongoing decisions that we could make on farm. Obviously there's a lot of problems and challenges. We've got to reach these goals. There's a lot of this technology around, but like, is it at a price point where we can apply it directly on farm? That's one of the big things. And we don't know that till we start down the path, so hopefully the yield mapping stuff for us works out alright. We've got to refine the process further. A lot of the slides I'll show you is fairly raw data. It's got to be refined further so it's more user friendly, so any of our operators or anyone in our production system, a pack shed operator or anyone can look at this information and it can make sense to them. Just not the agros or the precision ag guys that specialise in that area. We've got to use this information to add value to our product. So we need a return on investment for the money that we put into this type of technology. So again, big one for us would be knowing what stock we've got in the field so we can make sales decisions so we can then improve the value of our product. Challenges, delivery of the delivery time of this information. We're still working on getting our turnaround on by the time the information goes from the harvester to, it's got to be outsourced to actually generate a yield map, and then the information's obviously got to come back to us. So we've got to work on the speed in which that happens. Calibration will be an ongoing issue to make sure that the yield monitoring equipment's accurate. Obviously it's exposed to a variety of adverse conditions when you're harvesting carrots in wet conditions, muddy conditions, all sorts of weather, and maintenance of course is difficult when you deal with more technology, advanced technology. The maintenance becomes more difficult. So hopefully that shows up okay. It's sort of the process that we go through when we're yield mapping. So first of all, when the carrot harvester, carrot harvester there in the pictures, a new AZLIFT harvester purchased by Harvest Moon. First of all, we had to actually install the yield monitor ourselves. AZLIFT don't really focus any of their efforts on yield mapping or yield monitoring through any of their harvesting equipment, so it wasn't given to us as an option when we acquired the machine. So that was a little bit disappointing, although Tim touched on many of the machinery producers are like adding this technology to their equipment, but it wasn't the case for us. So we had to get that fitted once we acquired the machine. And as I've learnt, yield monitors don't just punch out yield maps, they actually measure what's called mass flow or the weight coming over the conveyor. So you've got that information raw raw data coming to you, and you've got to then interpret that, which has normally got to be outsourced through a service provider to actually turn that into like yield per metre and yield per hectare, and then from that generate a yield map, similar to what Tim showed earlier on. And from that you can format a yield map down to a dollar value, or there's a variety of different methods we're looking at to actually display the data so that the yield information so that it's more accurate, or it's going to be conveyed in a form that growers can make decisions and Harvest Moon can make decisions on that information. So I just wanted to get some quick photos of how it sort of looks in the field. There's a display in the cab of the harvester, which for the operator, the first thing he learns is what his gross tonnage is. So straight away, there's a bit of information there that you can use straight away. He knows how many tonnes has gone through that harvester in a given day, which comes up on the screen. So already, you're already getting some information feedback there that you wouldn't normally have. Normally you'd be counting skips and you'd be guessing tonnes and all that sort of stuff, but it's taken the guesswork out of it. So we're already accomplishing some of our goals. One of the tricky parts was around installation. Really, a harvester that wants to do extremely accurate yield mappings, the machine's got to be manufactured with a point where the yield monitor can be fitted, and obviously ours was built to harvest carrots with no thoughts placed around yield monitoring. So we had to fit the yield monitor to that section there, which is our main elevator. We had to capture it there because that's the section after we've cleaned most of the dirt off the carrots. The problem there is that main elevator sits at an angle, and for correct yield monitoring, the elevator should be flat, so that was our first challenge. What we were able to achieve though is that the elevator was able to be maintained on a constant angle, so then we were able to sort of calibrate our measurements off that, and to date that's working okay. But these are a lot of the little challenges that, the technology's there to monitor yield and map it and do all the rest of it, but then this is when you get your hands dirty and you've actually got to fit it onto a machine and make it work, and that's when the challenges really arise. So now we've got it fitted, we have the software to utilise this yield monitor. At this stage we're nowhere near mapping through the process, but what I've got, it's on an iPad, iPhone, it's on my desktop. So anywhere I am in the world, as long as I've got my phone on me, I can access the software and I can see where the harvester is. I know where it's driven in the paddock, and I can see the yields that have gone along the conveyor that I showed previously where we put the monitor in. So that's just a screenshot there, and some of these screenshots are not that clear, so I apologise for that. Those lines are obviously where the harvester's harvested on that given day, and this is live streaming to our outsourced service provider that will then generate yield. So it's recording the kilograms of product per minute at each individual point and feeding those back to an external service provider. And this is how complex it gets, and this is why we've got to simplify it further. I mean, basically, once you've fitted the yield monitor, eventually as a company or as a farmer, you'd want to outsource all this type of software side of it. But because I'm more interested in learning how it all works, I've been very closely looking at how the raw data flows, just to make sure that I can give advice to other operators or our service provider on how we can improve on that. So on this side, I can search On that side there, I can search on dates. I can pull up any date that the harvester ran and check where it was. The blue graph, I can click on a button, I can graph speed, the mass flow that's going across the conveyor. I can look at all those things. So after looking at it we've only had it in for like 2-3 months, but even the mass flow alone without generating a tonnes per hectare, I can get an idea of how many tonnes per hectare we are actually doing by looking at the mass flow chart or graph. Reason being that the harvester operates at a constant speed, so it generally makes it that little bit easier if you're doing 600 kilograms a minute or 800 kilograms a minute to then work out what that's going to be when you pack it out in the shed. Eventually I'd like to tailor our software a little bit more, so instead of kilograms per minute, which means very little to a grower or someone that works in a pack shed, I'd like to format this a little bit more with our service provider and have that just as a tonnes per hectare calculation or a graph, so that'd be a lot more useful for us. Just a little bit more, another picture of that layout of that software. And again, most of that stuff I've already covered. The information that we get off that, it all comes in real time. It's the mass flow rate, speed, location, and we can track what parts of the crop we harvest, which is important. So if we've got quality issues and we know what part of the paddock they're in, obviously if you're an agronomist or if you're managing from the company perspective, you're not in the paddock, so it's a handy way to check up on your harvest operator to make sure he's in the right spot that he should be in. So all this information, like I said, is live streamed, so our harvester is tracked externally, and that information then is processed, and we're working on putting that into yield maps. So then when you get to the yield mapping bit, it's like, which bit do we look at? We can map it into tonnes per hectare. We can map it into like a standard deviation or variation across a field. And we're also looking at the variation percentage below and above the average yield. So it's mainly looking at variation, but it's just the different ways in which you display it. And I agree with Tim that the best way is to turn it into dollars, and the path that we're probably looking at going down is a percent variation above and below the average, because I like the idea of that, because calibration may falter in between different paddocks, whereas once you've started a paddock, the weather conditions generally stay the same. So if we're looking at percentage of below and above the average, we can give that individual paddock, that individual grower, that's relevant to that field. So we're going to look at mainly that sort of mapping, and then convert that into obviously a dollars, how many dollars he's losing in sections, or why his good parts of his paddock are performing that way. And that's just a larger version of that map, above and below average yield as a percentage. So like, given that we've got all the tonnes per hectare data and the dollars per tonne, we can calculate, obviously red's bad, blue's good. Everyone likes these sexy pictures, as Will keeps on telling me to call them. So good bits, bad bits, and we want to put a dollar figure on those. That's our aim. Just one more slide. It's just, that's how it appears on your mobile device. Like, it's got a different layout on your desktop to your mobile device. I find it all works for me as long as that information's live streaming back. And then integrating other technology. The next thing we want to do, late this season or in the off season when we can look at it further, we've taken some satellite imagery and we want to overlay the satellite imagery with the yield mapping that we've done and correlate any, or look at any correlations that lie there so we can manage those fields better into the future. So I think that pretty much sums me up. Thanks.